August 8, 1944, the most feared tank commander of the Second World War sat in the commander's cupola of his Tiger 007, advancing across a field near the French village of Gomsnell. SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann, the Black Baron, was a legend in the Panzerwaffe. With 138 confirmed tank kills to his name, he was the apex predator of the Eastern and Western fronts, a man who had single-handedly destroyed entire British armored columns at Villers-Bocage just 2 months earlier. To the German propaganda machine, he was invincible. To his crew, he was a guarantee of survival. But the battlefield of August 1944 was no longer the arena of skill it had been in 1940 or 1941. As Wittmann's Tiger rumbled forward to counterattack Allied forces south of Caen, the sky above him was not empty. It belonged to the Royal Air Force. Minutes later, a catastrophic explosion tore the turret off Wittmann's 47-ton Tiger, killing the entire crew instantly. While historians would later debate whether the fatal shot came from a Canadian Sherman Firefly or an aerial rocket, the rumor that swept through the German ranks was immediate and paralyzing. The Jabos got Wittmann. If the ace of aces could be obliterated from the sky without even seeing his enemy, no one was safe. This realization marked a psychological turning point for the German Panzer divisions in Normandy. The hunters had become the hunted. Elite crews who had survived the frozen hell of the Russian front now found themselves trembling at the sound of an approaching aircraft engine. They called the roads of Normandy the Jabo-Rennstrecke, the fighter-bomber racecourse. A gauntlet of death where skill, armor thickness, and tactical brilliance meant nothing. General Fritz Bayerlein, commander of the elite Panzer Lehr division, described the reality facing his men not as a battle, but as a systematic execution. "My front lines looked like a landscape on the moon," he reported after a concentrated air attack, noting that his division had been stripped of its ability to fight before it even saw an Allied tank. The weapon responsible for this new reign of terror was not a better tank, but a single-engine aircraft that had been considered a failure just 2 years prior, the Hawker Typhoon. The instrument of this destruction was the Hawker Typhoon Mark 1B, a machine that pilots affectionately, and sometimes fearfully, described as a flying brick. Unlike the graceful Supermarine Spitfire, designed for high-altitude dogfights, the Typhoon was a 7-ton brute powered by a massive 2,000-horsepower Napier Sabre engine. It was built for low-level violence, designed to operate in the chaotic airspace just above the treetops. But what terrified German tank crews wasn't the aircraft's speed or its 4 20mm cannons. It was what hung beneath its wings. Standard operating procedure for the 2nd Tactical Air Force was to equip each Typhoon with 8 RP-3 rockets. These were not precision instruments in the modern sense. They were simple, devastating sledgehammers consisting of 60-pound high-explosive warheads mounted on 3-inch solid-fuel motors. When fired, they accelerated to a velocity of 1,000 feet per second, striking their targets with the kinetic energy of a small naval destroyer shell. For a German Panzer commander sitting inside a Panther or Tiger tank, the mathematics of survival were grim. The Panther, Germany's most numerous medium tank in Normandy, relied on 80 millimeters of frontal armor to deflect Allied tank shells. However, its side armor was only 45 millimeters thick, and its rear armor just 40. Against the Typhoon's rockets, which could penetrate 5 inches of armor plate even at a 30-degree angle, the Panther's steel protection was effectively paper. The attack profile used by RAF pilots was designed to maximize this vulnerability. Squadron leaders like J.R. Baldwin would spot German columns from an altitude of 3,000 meters, then roll their aircraft into steep, 45-degree dives. The pilots would hold their dive until the altimeter read 600 meters, filling their windscreens with the terrified, desperate maneuvering of the German armor below, before unleashing their rockets in pairs or salvos. The psychological impact of these attacks often exceeded the physical damage. Even a near miss with a 60-pound warhead created a massive blast overpressure capable of shattering tank tracks, cracking optical sights, and killing crew members inside the hull through sheer concussion. German crews quickly learned that their heavy armor, designed to stop solid steel slugs, offered no protection against the shockwaves of aerial bombardment. But the true horror for the Wehrmacht wasn't the individual aircraft. It was the sheer scale of the system that deployed them. The true horror for the Wehrmacht wasn't the individual aircraft. It was the sheer scale of the system that deployed them. The German commanders were not fighting independent pilots. They were fighting an integrated industrial process designed to turn the battlefield into a kill zone. By August 1944, the RAF's 2nd Tactical Air Force had established 18 forward airfields in Normandy, with an average distance to the front line of just 35 kilometers. This proximity was the decisive variable. It reduced flight times to a mere 8 minutes, allowing Typhoons to respond to target requests in under 15 minutes from the initial radio call to rockets impacting the target. To understand the lethality of this loop, one must look at the experience of the American ground units who acted as the eyes of the RAF. During the Normandy counterattack, Captain James Crawford of the 30th Infantry Division was positioned on Hill 314, 200 meters above the valley floor. From this vantage point, he had a direct line of sight to the German armored formations attempting to advance. Crawford radioed target coordinates to RAF control every 8 to 12 minutes, and the Typhoons adjusted their attack runs based on his real-time updates. This was the cab rank system in action, a continuous rotation of aircraft waiting overhead for instructions. On August 7th alone, the RAF maintained an average of 47 Typhoons over the Normandy battlefield at any given moment between 0830 and 1800 hours. For the German crews below, there was no respite. If they moved, they were spotted by forward controllers like Crawford. If they stopped to camouflage, the controllers directed the aircraft to their static positions. The operational cycle was relentless. A Typhoon squadron could launch, attack, return to base, and rearm in just 47 minutes. This meant that a single squadron could fly multiple sorties in a morning, effectively multiplying their force presence. Against this relentless cycle, the German command structure began to fracture. General Eberbach, commanding Panzer Group West, watched as his offensive dissolved not because of enemy tanks, but because his own forces were paralyzed. His operations officer reported that all forward movement had ceased, with units begging for permission to withdraw to covered positions, a request Eberbach had to deny due to Hitler's explicit orders. While the RAF operated with industrial precision, the German response was non-existent. The disparity between the two air forces on that decisive day illustrates why the Wehrmacht's tactical skills had become irrelevant. On August 7th, the Luftwaffe managed to fly only 23 sorties over Normandy. By contrast, the Allied air forces flew 706 sorties, including 294 specifically by Typhoons. The ratio was 31-1. This inequality was structural. German aircraft were scattered across airfields in eastern France, 150 to 200 kilometers from the front. If a German ground commander requested air support, the response time was over 90 minutes, if aircraft were available at all. In a battle where Typhoon pilots were reattacking every 4 minutes, a 90-minute delay was an eternity. The sky belonged completely to the Allies, and the German ground forces were left to suffer the consequences of this abandonment. The physical results of this dominance were catastrophic, though perhaps not in the way the pilots initially thought. In the heat of battle, Typhoon pilots claimed to have destroyed 140 German tanks. Post-battle analysis by ground teams later confirmed only 81 tanks directly destroyed by air attack, with another 42 disabled by near misses. The rockets were difficult to aim, and the smoke from explosions often led pilots to target the same burning hulks multiple times. However, focusing on the tank kill counts misses the true devastation inflicted that day. The rockets that missed the hardened tanks utterly obliterated the soft-skinned support vehicles that kept the Panzer divisions moving. In just 7 hours, the RAF destroyed 247 trucks, 89 half-tracks, and 34 fuel tankers. The total loss of soft-skinned vehicles amounted to 440 units. These losses were arguably more damaging than the tank kills. A Tiger tank without fuel trucks is nothing more than a stationary pillbox. An infantry unit without half-tracks cannot protect the flanks of an armored column. By destroying the logistical tail of the German army, the Typhoons stripped the Panzer divisions of their greatest asset, mobility. General Eberbach's force was transformed from a dynamic offensive spearhead into a collection of isolated, immobile metal islands, stranded without ammunition or gasoline. To understand why General Eberbach found himself staring at a sky filled with enemy aircraft, we must look beyond the hedgerows of Normandy to the factory floors of Detroit, Coventry, and the Ruhr Valley. The reason for the Allied dominance was not a lack of German engineering skill. In fact, German industry performed a miracle of production in 1944. Despite constant bombing, Germany produced 39,807 aircraft that year, 50% more than Britain, which built 26,461. By raw numbers alone, the Luftwaffe should have been a formidable presence. But Germany was fighting a three-front war. Its aircraft production had to be fractured across the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union, the Mediterranean theater in Italy, and the defense of the Reich itself. In Normandy, the Luftwaffe could only scrape together 570 operational aircraft by August. The British, facing only one primary front in Western Europe, concentrated their forces. The 2nd Tactical Air Force alone fielded 2,847 operational aircraft, a local superiority of 5-1. When American production entered the equation, the disparity became insurmountable. In 1944, the United States produced 96,318 aircraft, more than double Germany's total output. American factories delivered over 16,000 fighters and 35,000 bombers in a single year. The combined Allied production reached 122,779 aircraft against Germany's 39,000, creating a global ratio of roughly 3-1. The mathematics of attrition were even more brutal than the production figures suggested. It wasn't just about how many planes were built, but how fast they could be replaced. Hawker Aircraft Ltd. produced an average of 9 Typhoons per day, requiring 2,847 man-hours per aircraft. Germany's equivalent, the Focke-Wulf 190, required 4,200 man-hours to build. The Allies were building simpler machines faster, while Germany over-engineered its weapons into irrelevance. Crucially, the Luftwaffe was bleeding out. By 1944, German fighter units on the Western Front were suffering loss rates of 31% per month. At that rate, the entire fighter force had to be replaced every 3.5 months. The RAF, by contrast, suffered loss rates of just 4.2% per month, meaning their force only needed full replacement every 2 years. Germany had to produce 7 times as many fighters just to stand still, but their factories could only manage a fraction of that. 3 days after the disaster at Mordain on August 10, 1944, General Eberbach attended a somber conference at Army Group B headquarters. When asked by Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge if Normandy could be held, Eberbach's answer was preserved in the conference minutes. "We cannot hold against their air power," he stated. "We are not fighting an army. We are fighting an industrial system that can replace losses faster than we can inflict them." He was right. The tactical problem of the Typhoon rockets had revealed the strategic reality of the war. Eberbach noted that while the Germans could not replace 50 lost aircraft in a month, the Allies could replace them in a week. The Mordain counterattack failed because 185 German tanks faced a system capable of deploying 486 Typhoons in a single day, backed by unlimited replacement capacity. General Eberbach's war ended on August 31, 1944, when he was captured by British forces near Amiens. He survived the war, returning to Germany in 1948 and living until 1992. In his memoirs, he reflected on that clear morning in August, writing, "We lost the battle in 7 hours, but we had already lost the war in the factories. We just didn't know it yet." The lesson of the Typhoon attacks was not about the superiority of rockets over armor, but about the nature of modern warfare. Wars are won by the side that can build more, replace faster, and sustain losses longer. In 1944, that side was the Allies. The factories had decided the outcome long before the tanks started their engines. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the industrial reality of World War II, please like and subscribe for more forgotten stories from the front lines. What other battles should we analyze next? Let us know in the comments below.